Right after my wife Linda's funeral, my son David leaned in and whispered coldly, "Dad, maybe it's time you sign the house over. It's worth 650,000. Add your 250,000 insurance and we'll be set." My heart shattered. But Linda had left me a sealed wooden box. Inside was a secret that could burn their lies to the ground. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat in my chair that night, the old recliner that Linda and I bought 30 years ago when we first moved into this house, and the memories came crashing down on me. My son David had always been at the center of those memories. I worked double shifts when he was in high school, wiring office buildings during the day and fixing neighbors' outlets at night. When he was accepted into Ohio State, I didn't blink at the tuition. $60,000 over 4 years, paid out of pocket, every last dime earned from climbing ladders and crawling through attics. I sold my old Chevy truck for $20,000, the one I had polished every Sunday morning, just so he could have a used Honda to get around campus. And when he got married, I wrote a check for $15,000 to cover the reception because he said he didn't want to start his new life in debt. Those weren't just numbers. They were pieces of me, pieces of my time, my strength, my health. And now, after all of it, he sat at my own table with Amanda, whispering about selling my $650,000 house and cashing in my $250,000 insurance policy as if my life were nothing more than a ledger. I remembered nights when Linda and I ate rice and beans 3 times a week because saving for David's future felt more important than enjoying our present. We skipped vacations, canceled dinners with friends, even let the roof leak for 2 years before we fixed it, all so he could have more. I gave up more than money. I gave up parts of the man I might have been. And in return, he gave me betrayal. The house itself, this home Linda and I built, is worth $650,000 now. But to me, it's never just been about the market value. Every wall carries a story. Linda picked the paint for the kitchen sunflower yellow because she wanted the mornings to feel like summer even in January. The oak banister, polished smooth by our hands, was where David slid down in his pajamas every Christmas morning. The garden out back, where Linda grew her roses, still smells faintly sweet on warm evenings. But when I look at it now, all I feel is a knife twisting in my chest. This place we built, this legacy of laughter and sacrifice, has turned into nothing but a prize for vultures circling my old age. The family photos on the mantel, once warm reminders of love, now look like evidence exhibits in a trial. The wedding picture of Linda and me, her veil catching the sunlight, no longer glows with happiness. It mocks me with the memory of vows that built a family, vows my own son has spat on for the sake of money. The silence in the living room is deafening. Once it was filled with Linda's humming, David's laughter, and the smell of Sunday roasts. Now it holds only betrayal and the shadow of greed. I walk from room to room and everything feels stolen already, as though Amanda's sharp eyes have stripped the soul from these walls. The house is mine, but it no longer feels like home. It feels like the battlefield, where the past collides with the ugliness of the present. It was while sorting through Linda's things in the upstairs closet that I found it. A wooden box I hadn't noticed before, small enough to fit in my lap, but heavy with history. The lid creaked when I opened it, the scent of cedar rising like a breath from another time. Inside was a stack of folded papers, Linda's handwriting on the top sheet. My pulse quickened as I read the note. She had taken out a separate life insurance policy, one I never knew about, and kept it in her name alone. The documents showed Amanda had once been flagged for financial fraud in another state, her real last name Walsh, not the tidy Amanda Miller she carried into our family. My stomach turned as I read on, realizing Linda must have known something was off but kept it hidden, maybe hoping I wouldn't have to face it until now. The box held more. Receipts, clippings, even a letter from a lawyer Linda had consulted, all pointing to Amanda's past as a predator who moved from town to town. It wasn't just about my house or my insurance. Amanda had been weaving this web long before she ever met David. My wife had carried this secret to her grave, leaving it for me to discover, perhaps as her final way of arming me. And in that moment, grief turned into something sharper. My heart ached with a double pain. The betrayal of my son, and the knowledge that Linda had borne this burden alone. She must have prayed I'd never need to open that box. Yet here I was, staring at the truth that changed everything. I sat with those papers spread across the dining table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, and the weight of realization sank deep. I had been blind. For years, I thought my love and sacrifices would protect me from this kind of treachery. I thought money could keep David safe, that giving would keep him grateful. But gratitude had rotted into entitlement, and Amanda had poured poison into whatever heart he had left. At first, I felt crushed, like the walls themselves were pressing down on me. But then something shifted. Linda hadn't left that box for me to drown in sorrow. She left it as a weapon, a piece of armor, proof that what I faced wasn't just greed but a criminal design. I whispered into the quiet room, "Linda, I see it now. I see what you were trying to tell me." The grief in my chest still throbbed, but beneath it a steel resolve began to form. My pain wasn't just pain anymore. It was a purpose. Protecting the house wasn't only about bricks and dollars. It was about defending Linda's memory, about carrying her fight where she left off. The decision settled into me like stone. I would not go quietly. I would not be the easy victim Amanda counted on. I reached for my phone later that evening and stared at the messages from David. The last one read, "Dad, can you send another 2,000 to help with bills? Amanda and I are struggling." I hovered for a moment, my thumb trembling, the old instinct to help tugging at me. For decades I had answered every call, wired every check, bailed him out of every mistake. That reflex was carved into me like bone. But tonight I pressed delete. One by one the words disappeared from the screen, and with them the chain that bound me. It was such a small act, yet it felt monumental, like I had reclaimed a piece of myself that had been stolen. For the first time in years, I chose silence instead of sacrifice. The air felt different, lighter, as though the house itself exhaled with me. I powered the phone down and set it aside, not as an escape, but as a declaration. My life was no longer at their command. That tiny act, erasing a message, was the first step toward freedom, the first proof that I could still stand my ground. The living room grew darker as the sun slipped behind the trees, shadows stretching across the carpet Linda once vacuumed every Saturday morning. I sat with the photo of her in my hands, her smile frozen in the frame. For decades, this room had been the heart of our home, a place of warmth and laughter. Now, under the ticking of the grandfather clock, it felt like a waiting room for judgment. The chair that had cradled my tired body after long workdays now made me feel like a prisoner. The clock's steady tick no longer soothed me. It sounded like a countdown to the storm ahead. I whispered to the photo, my voice breaking, "Linda, you'll see. I will protect what we built. I won't let them tear it apart." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of memory, of betrayal, and of a promise that still bound me to her. The house, once a sanctuary, had become the front line. Yet, as I sat there, I realized I wasn't defeated. I was waiting for the moment to act, waiting for the right strike. Every picture, every shadow in that room reminded me of loss, but also of what was worth fighting for. And in that space between grief and resolve, I found something I hadn't felt in years, the clarity of purpose. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment one below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness in my chest, but it wasn't the same paralyzing weight of grief that had held me down the night before. Something had shifted. The box Linda left me, the papers, the proof of Amanda's lies, it all worked like a spark on a pile of dry wood. I had been mourning, yes, but now my sorrow was no longer only sorrow. It was the fuel for something else, something sharper. I brewed a pot of coffee, my hands steady for the first time in days, and sat at the kitchen table where I used to drink with Linda while she planned our garden. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca Hayes, the lawyer Linda and I had used to set up our wills years ago. Her voice was calm but firm, the kind of voice that gave me a strange sense of safety. I told her what had happened, what I had overheard, and the documents I had found in Linda's box. She didn't sound surprised. She only said, "Mr. Miller, I want you to come to my office today. We need to freeze everything, your accounts, your house title, your insurance policy, all of it, and bring that box." I drove downtown, every mile of the road feeling like a march toward battle. The courthouse loomed to my left, and Rebecca's office was just across from the bank. Walking into that building, my chest tightened, but when I shook her hand and laid the wooden box on her desk, I felt control slipping back into my grip. She went through the documents carefully, nodding as though she had expected every ugly line. "This is strong," she said. "It's not just suspicion, it's evidence. We'll file for a freeze today, and I'll prepare injunction papers to protect you from any forced transfer." She slid the forms toward me, and as I signed them, I noticed something that startled me. My signature was clean, no tremor, no hesitation. Yesterday, I could barely hold a pen without my hands shaking. Today, the ink flowed like it had been waiting for this moment. My voice, when I spoke to the banker on the other end of the conference call, was clear and firm. "Yes, freeze the account. $300,000 in savings. Do not allow withdrawals without my approval." The banker hesitated, then asked gently, "Mr. Miller, are you all right? I just want to make sure you're not under pressure." That simple question cut me deeper than any insult Amanda had ever thrown. A stranger's kindness contrasted so sharply with the cold greed of my own son. I swallowed hard and said, "I'm fine, I'm taking care of it." Later that evening, David and Amanda came over for dinner. Amanda had that fixed smile on her face, the one she wore when she was pretending to play the sweet daughter-in-law. She had cooked lasagna and said she wanted to give me a break. David looked tired, his eyes darting everywhere except mine. Halfway through the meal, Amanda leaned in and set her fork down. "Dad, we should talk about the house," she said lightly. "It's a lot for you to handle alone. Maybe it's time we started the paperwork. It would give you peace of mind." David shifted uncomfortably, not looking up. My chest burned, but I didn't speak. I took a sip of water, nodded slightly, and let her keep going. She talked about market values, about how the neighborhood was hot right now, about how $650,000 could be liquidated quickly. She spoke with the confidence of someone who thought the battle was already won. I just sat, quiet, letting her spin the rope she was hanging herself with. Linda used to tell me silence is sometimes the sharpest weapon. Tonight, I understood what she meant. After they left, I sat back in the chair and thought about the contrast of the evening. Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, had stopped by earlier in the day with a plate of brownies. She looked me in the eye and asked how I was holding up, her hand on my arm. No agenda, no calculation, just human kindness. And then, hours later, in my own kitchen, my son and his wife tried to barter my home like it was a pawn ticket. That contrast hit me like a hammer. It wasn't just greed. It was betrayal at the deepest level. That realization didn't crush me. It hardened me. Rebecca called me the next morning. "I dug deeper," she said. "Amanda Walsh. That's her real name. She went by Jennifer Walsh until about 10 years ago. 2 suspicious cases are tied to her name. An elderly man in Indiana, a widow in Illinois. Both died suddenly. Both had life insurance payouts that she benefited from. Nothing was ever proved, but it's all here in public record." My blood turned to ice as I listened. "She's not just greedy," I whispered. "She's dangerous." Rebecca paused, then said, "And now you know. That's your ace." I stared at the photo of Linda on the mantel and thought, she knew. She always knew. That evening, I found myself face to face with Amanda again. She had come by unannounced, carrying folders and charts, acting like she was managing my retirement. She laid out numbers on the table, sliding graphs toward me, talking about how much insurance would cover, how the house could be split. "It's all for your benefit, Dad," she said sweetly. I didn't answer. I just watched her. Every word she spoke was like a note in a rehearsed performance. David sat beside her, quiet, his eyes darting again. Then Amanda did something that lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. She pulled out Linda's old will, one from decades ago that had since been updated, and smirked. "Linda wanted everything for you. She never even thought about David. That's selfish, don't you think? Maybe she wasn't as perfect as you make her out to be." My heart pounded in my ears. For a moment, I thought I might lose control, but then the anger sharpened into clarity. I said nothing. I let her see nothing. Because I knew something she didn't. I held her past in my hands. When they left, I gathered the papers Rebecca had given me, the public records, the proof of Amanda's false identity. I stacked them neatly, then placed Linda's wooden box on top. I whispered. They think I'm weak, Linda. They think this is the end, but they have no idea. This is only the beginning. I signed the last set of legal documents that night, securing the house, freezing the accounts, and locking down the insurance. My hands were steady, my pen slicing across the page with purpose. For the first time since Linda's funeral, I felt in control. My grief was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer chains around my chest. It was armor. And so, as I sat there in the dim light of the living room, the clock ticking steadily in the background, I knew the tide had turned. They thought they had trapped me, but I was setting the stage for their downfall. I held the papers, the evidence, the truth. They don't know I have it. They don't know it's all about to change. If you've ever seen someone dismiss the lifelong sacrifices of a parent, treating them like scraps, then you'll understand this moment. Comment just one word: respect. Because respect is all we ever want, and it's the one thing they never gave me. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The air in my living room felt thick, like a storm pressing down on the roof before the first crack of thunder. I had drawn the curtains to cut the glare, set a pitcher of water on the coffee table, and laid a yellow legal pad beside my chair. The grandfather clock ticked slowly and evenly, the same way it had on Linda's last night in this house. I took one breath, then another. This was the place where we'd celebrated every birthday, where David had once blown out candles with frosting on his chin. Tonight, it was a courtroom without a bench, a stage with no applause. I had asked them to come. I chose home for a reason. If truth were going to put its hands on us, it would do it in my own living room, under the gaze of every photograph on the mantel. David arrived first, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes scanning the room and avoiding mine. Amanda followed, crisp blouse, sleek folder tucked against her side like a winning lottery ticket. She offered a smile that never touched her eyes. "We came as you asked," she said. "I hope this will be productive for everyone." Her voice was smooth, professional, the tone of someone who counts on tone to do the lying. Behind them came Rebecca Hayes with her briefcase, Doctor Grant with his soft leather bag and calm posture, and Mrs. Collins, still in her church sweater, clutching a small notebook because she writes down things when nerves get high. I had asked each of them for a reason, not to attack, to witness, to anchor the room with something besides my grief. Nobody sat right away. There's always a stiffness at the beginning, like people waiting for a hymn number they don't know. I gestured to the sofa. "Let's sit," I said. "We'll keep this simple." The clock ticked. The house seemed to hold its breath. Amanda was the first to find her voice. She rested her folder on her lap and crossed her legs. "We've drafted a plan," she said gently, eyes sliding to Rebecca as if they were colleagues and not opposites. "A transition. We can help manage the house. Market value is favorable. 650,000. Maybe a little higher with the new constructions on the next block. If we list this month, we can move quickly and avoid tax complications. Your savings well. Liquidity is useful, especially at your age. We can consolidate the 3 accounts into one that we control together. Less paperwork for you. More security for everyone." She smiled. "You've done a beautiful job for so long. Let us take it from here." David nodded, but his throat worked like he was swallowing a dry pill. "It makes sense, Dad," he mumbled. "It's best. For you. For me." Those words used to get past my guard. Not tonight. I folded my hands and let the silence stretch until it felt like a wire between us. Then I cleared my throat. "I appreciate the concern," I said even. "Before we talk about plans, we're going to talk about facts." Rebecca set her briefcase on the coffee table and flipped the latches. She didn't make a show of it. She never grandstands. She simply opened a folder and slid out a short stack of papers, not yet revealing the thick pile beneath. "Mr. Miller has asked me to confirm several filings," she said, voice clear. "As of yesterday morning, the property deed for this home has been placed into an irrevocable trust. The trust is administered by my office. Beneficiary provisions are sealed. The bank has implemented a hard freeze on the 3 accounts totaling approximately $300,000. Withdrawals require Mr. Miller's direct, in-person authorization. The life insurance policy Linda established is likewise restricted and no longer subject to external claim or change. These filings are legal and complete. Amanda blinked. Just once. Then she smiled again, wider, and placed a palm on her folder. "Mr. Miller," she said, turning to me, "this sort of rigidity is common after a loss. It's a fear response, but you can always reverse it. Trusts can be amended. People do it all the time." Rebecca folded her hands. "Not this one. The first crack sounded then. Not in the ceiling. In Amanda's voice. She laughed, soft and dismissive, then cut her eyes at David with a signal to let her steer. "Let's step back," she murmured, and her tone shifted into sweet reason. "We're here to make sure your future is peaceful. Managing a $650,000 asset is hard. Bills, maintenance, vulnerabilities. Scammers target seniors. It would be irresponsible for us not to help." Mrs. Collins, who had been quiet with her hands folded in her lap like she was at choir practice, lifted her head. "He's not vulnerable," she said, voice steady. "He fixed my fuse box last week in 10 minutes flat. Brought his own tools. Explained every step so I'd understand. He remembered the part number for my breaker from memory. People who aren't thinking straight don't do that." She looked at me and gave a small nod, then looked back at Amanda. "You should know, he's sharp." "Doctor." Grant set his bag beside his chair and cleared his throat with a doctor's patience. "I examined Mr. Miller yesterday," he said. "Independent cognitive assessment. Memory, reasoning, judgment. He performed exceptionally. Better than most men 10 years younger. I signed it, and I'll stand behind it in any room that matters." His eyes softened as he looked toward me. "He's grieving, he's not confused." Amanda shifted again just a shade. The folder on her lap lost a fraction of an inch of its perfect angle. "Of course," she said. "We never implied otherwise." I let the next silence grow until the room felt honest. "You implied otherwise," I said. Not loud, not cruel, just true, more than once. I took the yellow pad, slipped it under my palm, and gave myself 1 second to hear Linda's voice. "Steady, Stephen, steady." Then I began with the small things, the lies that seemed harmless until they stacked like bricks. "Let's tidy the record," I said. "Tuition, Ohio State. 60,000 across 4 years. I paid it. The receipts are in the file closet, but I remember the amounts because I wrote those checks on my lunch break, sitting on an upturned bucket. The Honda, 20,000 cash. My truck was sold to pay for it. The wedding reception, 15,000. I covered the deposit when the caterer called and said the card had bounced. Those are numbers. Those are not opinions." David's jaw tightened. "We always said we'd pay you back." "Words," I said, "not payments." Amanda took a breath through her nose, then exhaled a smile as if she'd decided the path forward was to act unbothered. "Mr. Miller," she said sweetly, "the past isn't the issue. The issue is your safety and comfort now. You've already put things in a trust. Good. We'll simply be named co-trustees. We can sign those forms today. You'll see this is the cleanest way." Rebecca slid a single page from her stack and laid it on the table between us. "That will not be happening," she said. "And it is not the cleanest way. It is the way that exposes Mr. Miller to the very risks we've already prevented." She paused. "Also, Mrs. Walsh." The name hung in the air like a bell struck once and left to ring. Amanda didn't move. Then she laughed again, a quick trill, like an actress missing a cue and trying to catch up. "I'm sorry," she said brightly. "Walsh?" Rebecca didn't blink. "Your legal name," she answered. "Jennifer Walsh, formerly used in Indiana and Illinois. You've gone by Amanda for the last few years. That is your right. But for the sake of clarity, we should use the accurate one." David turned, a slow pivot, confusion pulling his brows together. "Amanda?" His voice was small, like a boy lost in a store aisle. "It's nothing," she snapped. Then she recovered the smile. "It's a paperwork error. It happens." "Mrs." Collins made a note. The scratch of her pen sounded loud in the hush. I could have thrown everything onto the table right then. The clippings from Linda's box, the private investigator's memo, the 2 obituaries with dates that weren't accidents at all. But I didn't. Not yet. Truth needs order to keep from turning into noise. So I gave the room one more layer before the last. Before we continue, I said, I want you to listen to something. I set a small speaker on the table, nothing fancy, just big enough that Pastor Jim could hear the choir on Sundays when he borrows it. I tapped my phone. The room filled with my son's voice, and the voice of the woman who wasn't Amanda at all. Sunday morning, Jennifer said on the recording, clear as a winter sky. 8 a.m. Electrical shock in the workshop. He falls down the basement stairs. We wait. Call by noon, grieving family. Insurance pays. House sells in 60 days. David's breath hitched. What is this? He whispered, but it wasn't a question. The recording kept going. Numbers. Plans. A tone in Jennifer's voice I once mistook for competence, and now heard for what it was, cold calculation. Then the second voice again, my son's voice, lowered with shame. I don't know, Amanda, and Jennifer's correction, sharp as a slap. It's Jennifer when we're planning. I stopped the audio. No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. The clock filled the space with 3 steady ticks. David found words first and grabbed them like a rope. Dad, that's not... There's context you're missing. Context, I repeated, not a question this time. Context for the timetable of my death. Amanda didn't reach for him. She reached for her folder. When fear comes for people like her, they grab paper like a shield. You can fabricate anything with an app, she said brightly. Deep fakes. AI. It's a trend. Everyone knows that. Genuine file, Rebecca said, setting another document down. Chain of custody preserved. Time stamped off Mr. Miller's newly repaired security system. That file has already been archived in 2 separate locations. If anything happens to those devices, the evidence remains. Jennifer's smile died. What came next wasn't a crumble. It was a flash of teeth. You think you're clever, she hissed, and there was no Amanda in her voice now. You think this will stop what's already in motion? I held her eyes. I know exactly what this stops. David turned pale. You told me no one would get hurt, he said, but it came out like a boy's cry, not a man's argument. Jennifer turned on him with a look I had never seen because she had never let me see it. Grow up, she snapped. You said your deadline was Monday morning. You said your creditors have flinched. Didn't give extensions. You said the house was worth $650 and the savings were $300, and the policy would clear in 30 days, and we'd be in Florida by Christmas. She leaned back, composure already rebuilding itself in layers. You brought me here, David. Don't get delicate now. That's how it happens. The rot shows, and then it tries to paint itself pretty again. I let them swing at each other for one more beat because the room needed to see it, needed to hear the glue cracking inside their partnership. Then I placed my hand on the last folder and opened it. Linda left me a box, I said. She left me proof that you were never who you said you were. I slid 2 printed obituaries across the table, side by side. George Thompson of Indiana, Evelyn Carter of Illinois, both elderly, both were in good health until they weren't. Both have payouts attached to their names, both in proximity to a woman, going by Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer didn't blink. She didn't have to. The stillness said enough. I took a breath and laid the last sheet down, a letter Linda had written in her own slanted hand addressed to me. I had read it until the paper felt soft from the oils in my fingers. She suspected, I said. She watched. She prayed she was wrong. She wasn't. She didn't want to break our son's heart unless she had to. So she gave me what she knew, and waited to see which way the river would run after she was gone. It ran here. David stared at the letter like it might answer him. She knew? He whispered. She knew enough, I said. Then I turned to Jennifer. And I know the rest. For the first time, Jennifer dropped the smile entirely. What she put on in its place wasn't rage. It was boredom the face predators wear when the hunt goes sideways and they decide the herd isn't worth the effort. Fine, she said flatly. You've made a mess that will take years to untangle. He's not worth years. She flicked a glance at David that should have cut him in half. Plan B would have been cleaner anyway. Mrs. Collins frowned. Plan B? Jennifer's mouth twisted. The home, she said calmly, like she was offering dessert options. A cognitive declaration. 1 signed page, and he's not competent. You'd be surprised how easily the right doctor can be persuaded. Once he's in a facility, nobody listens to his objections. The accounts become ours to manage. No fall, no mess, quiet, efficient. Dr. Grant's voice sharpened like a scalpel. Over my dead body. Jennifer shrugged. Every system has a back door. That was it. That was the line that pulled something tight and righteous through the center of my chest. You can threaten my home. You can lie about my mind. You cannot erase my dignity and expect me to sit there and take it. I stood. My knees were steady. My breath was steady. My voice found a pitch I hadn't used since the day David was 12 and thought he could swear at his mother and walk away from it. Enough, I said. You two have treated me like a ledger line and Linda like a placeholder. Tonight, that ends. Rebecca didn't need a cue. She laid out the final stack injunction orders, trust documents, the fresh certification of the hard freezes, Dr. Grant's cognitive assessment, and the letter Linda wrote about the woman who had worked her way into our family. She spoke like a bell, clear, undeniable. These are filed. These are enforceable. These are in motion as we speak. David's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his hands like he didn't recognize them. We were drowning, he whispered to no one. I thought. He looked at me, tears starting to burn tracks he wiped at angrily. I thought you'd be gone soon anyway. My heart broke, but it didn't shatter. It broke the way ice breaks at the first thaw, no longer able to hold a weight that never should have been there. I am still here, I said, and I am not yours to spend. Jennifer stood, fast, chair legs scraping the wood. This is ridiculous, she snapped. We're leaving. Before you do, Rebecca said, calm as ever, I need to serve you with this. She handed Jennifer an envelope. Cease and desist regarding financial contact with Mr. Miller. If you so much as press him about accounts, property, or medical status again, we will file for a protective order. Copies of your alias history and the relevant obituaries are preserved, along with the recording we heard tonight. Law enforcement has been alerted to the existence of these materials. If anything happens to Mr. Miller, those files are in the hands of a detective who knows your name. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jennifer laughed. A real laugh this time, unpretty, bright with fury. You think this is justice? You think it fixes anything? She glanced at David as if she needed a flank and found none. You told me the trust could be cracked, she spat. You told me your father was soft. David's voice was a whisper. I was wrong. The sledge inside her eyes hit him anyway. You were useless, she said. You always were. There it was, the rift opening at their feet. Not because I put it there. Because the weight of their own choices split the ground beneath them. David turned to me, a drowning man reaching instinctively for the only shore he has ever known. Dad, he said, one word, all his boyhood in it. I can't save you from this, I answered softly. I can save myself. Mrs. Collins leaned forward, eyes fierce in a way I had only ever seen when she argued about hymn tempos with the choir director. I've watched him grieve with dignity, she said. I've watched him fix things for people without taking $1. I've watched him remember Linda with tenderness, not bitterness. If you were hoping to paint him as confused, or cruel, or unstable, no. That dog won't hunt. Not here. Not with me watching. Dr. Grant added one quiet sentence. He is competent. He is clear. Then he picked up his bag like the matter was settled, and there was nothing left to diagnose. Jennifer's shoulders tightened. The folder on her lap hung from her fingers as if it had lost its weight. She looked at me like I was a wall she could no longer climb, then at the door like it owed her a better exit. This isn't over, she said. It is here, I replied. She left first. No slam, no scene. Just a hard turn and a straight back, and heels that clicked fast across my porch. David followed, slower, as if the air had turned to syrup around his ankles. He paused at the doorway and glanced once toward the mantel where Linda's picture sits, her smile fixed on a moment that didn't have to account for this one. He didn't speak. He went down the steps and into a darkness that no porch light could soften. The house took a breath then. I heard it in the way the quiet changed. Rebecca gathered the documents with the same care she'd brought in. You did well, she said. You stayed steady. I was angrier than I sounded, I admitted. That's not the same as being out of control, she said gently. Anger harnessed to truth can do holy work. Mrs. Collins patted my arm. I'll walk home, she said. but I'll be watching my window. If you need anything, flick your porch light twice and I'll come back over with a pot of coffee." She smiled. Church women can move faster than you think. When they were gone, I sat again and looked at the papers spread like a map of the last year of my life. The $650,000 house in a trust Linda would have approved. The $300,000 in savings is frozen against anyone's rush to spend my days for me. The letter in her hand, the curve of her words steady even where mine would have shaken. I felt the ache in my chest, but I also felt something else rising through it. Not triumph, not gloating, a steadiness. The kind that comes when the tide you feared finally turns and you realize you didn't drown after all. I stood and walked to the safe down the hall. I put the documents in, closed the door, and turned the wheel until it caught. The click sounded like a bell in a chapel, small, true, enough. When I returned to the living room, the clock said 9:30. The night had settled. The house had too. In the morning, I would take copies of everything to Rebecca's office. In the afternoon, I would call Pastor Jim and ask if the community hall could use another set of hands for Friday's food boxes. In the evening, I would make a simple dinner and eat it at the table where Linda and I once argued about whether roses or tomatoes should get the sunny side of the fence. I would not check my phone for messages from David. If an apology came, it would come, and I would decide what to do with it when it did. What I would not do is mistake apology for repair. That takes time. That takes proof. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The porch light threw a soft circle over the steps. The rails I sanded last spring, the fern Linda insisted on keeping even after it went more brown than green. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then quit. The night was ordinary again. Ordinary felt like a gift. Hurt doesn't leave on command. It fades, it flares, it teaches. Tonight, it taught me the simple math of dignity. You can subtract schemes and still be whole. You can divide assets and still have enough. You can add witnesses and finally feel seen. And when someone tries to multiply your fear, you can refuse to carry the number. I turned back to the room and spoke into the quiet, not loudly, not for effect, but because a truth said out loud stands up straighter inside you. "They thought I was weak," I said. "Now they see the cost." I sat down, folded my hands on my knees, and let the last of the adrenaline drain away. The living room settled like a field after thunder. The clock resumed its small sermon. Tick, tock, trust, keep. I believed it. If you're still with me, let me say this plainly. Being treated like you don't matter cuts deep. Feeling dismissed, used, pushed aside, it hurts, doesn't it? If you believe every parent, every elder, every person deserves recognition and respect, comment one word: justice. Now let's see what they do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. When the judge's gavel fell for the final time, I knew the storm had passed. Amanda was taken away in handcuffs, her face drained of the confidence she once wore like armor. The woman who called herself my daughter-in-law was now called by her real name in court records, and for the next 15 years she would carry the weight of her crimes behind prison walls. David stood alone outside the courthouse, pale, shoulders slumped, as if the very world had turned its back on him. He had lost his job, his reputation, and the trust of every neighbor who once greeted him kindly. Creditors circled like vultures. I watched him from a distance and felt the sting of sorrow, but not regret. Choices carry consequences. He'd finally arrived. I drove back to the house with Rebecca, my attorney, sitting beside me. The roads were wet from an afternoon rain, and the tires hissed as they rolled. I glanced at the windows of familiar houses, the ones that had whispered about my downfall only months earlier. Now those same windows glowed with a different kind of silence, a knowing silence. Word had spread. People saw the truth. I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. I had fought back, and I had won. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee cooling slowly in my hands. The documents were stacked neatly before me. Proof of the trust, the deeds secured, the accounts frozen and released back under my sole authority. $600,000 in property, $300,000 in savings, and Linda's life insurance. The numbers no longer scared me. They weren't targets pinned to my back anymore. They were simply mine, to guard or to give. The next morning I made a choice. I called the realtor and told her to list one of the rental properties I had been keeping for years. It sold within weeks for $250,000. I signed over the proceeds to a foundation we set up through Rebecca's firm, a fund to help seniors fight financial scams. I named it after Linda, the Linda Miller Foundation for Dignity. The name alone steadied me. I knew she would have approved. She always believed in protecting others, even when she couldn't protect herself from time's cruelty. With the rest of my assets secured, I turned to my daily life. I decided to keep the family home. Selling it felt like letting Amanda and David's shadow win. Instead, I filled the rooms with new memories. I opened the curtains every morning. I polished Linda's rocking chair until the wood gleamed. I replanted her roses, even though the thorns still pricked my fingers. I invited neighbors for coffee, something I hadn't done in years. Mrs. Collins came first, carrying a pie as if nothing had changed between us. "You're lighter now," she said, patting my hand. And I was. Peace is not loud, it doesn't shout. It creeps in quietly, through routines that once felt empty. I joined a woodworking class at the community center. The first day, a younger man asked me how to balance the grain and cedar. I showed him, and his gratitude felt like sunlight. Soon, I was teaching more than I was building. Passing down what I knew reminded me that legacy doesn't have to come from blood. It can come from sharing skills, from giving patience, from standing steady in a room of strangers and watching them turn into friends. Meanwhile, Amanda's name became a headline, then a warning, then a forgotten note in the crime section. David, left without her, tried to start over. He moved into a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. Neighbors whispered when he walked by. Clients refused his calls. Once he sent me a letter. His handwriting wavered, almost childlike. "I'm sorry, Dad, I was drowning. I let her pull me under. Please forgive me." I read it at the table where Linda and I once argued over crossword puzzles. I folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, and never answered. Forgiveness, I realized, was not for him. It was for me. By choosing not to respond, I chose freedom. I didn't need his words to heal. I didn't need his excuses to breathe. Life steadied itself in small ways. I walked each morning in the park nearby, listening to the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I stopped by the church on Thursdays to help pack food boxes. Sometimes, I sat with other widowers in the hall, and we traded stories of mistakes and second chances. It struck me then peace grows best when shared. The more I gave away, the more I received back. One afternoon, as I rested on a bench at the park, a boy no older than 7 wandered over. His hair stuck out in a dozen directions, and he held a single maple leaf in his hand. Without a word, he offered it to me, his smile wide and fearless. I took it gently, surprised by the weight of such a small kindness. "For me?" I asked. He nodded, then ran back to his mother. I sat there, staring at the leaf, and felt something deep settle inside me. The world still carried innocence. Goodness hadn't vanished. It was waiting, right there in a child's hand. That night I whispered into the quiet house, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and I have this community." For the first time in years, the silence answered with peace instead of loneliness. As I look back now, the lessons stand clear as scripture carved in stone. For parents, I learned that love must have boundaries. Loving your children does not mean surrendering your dignity. Sacrifice without respect is not love, it is surrender, and surrender feeds greed. For children, the lesson is sharper. Betrayal carries a cost greater than any inheritance. You can steal a house, but you cannot steal trust. And once trust is gone, wealth is nothing but paper. For humanity itself, I learned that character is the one treasure no thief can take. Money fades. Houses crumble. But integrity that is forever. I hear sometimes that David still struggles. Odd jobs, debts piling, whispers chasing him wherever he goes. Amanda, behind her walls, will have years to think about every choice she made. I do not rejoice in their pain, but I do not carry it either. Their fate is their own. Mine is my peace. This chapter of betrayal has closed. I choose mornings in the garden, afternoons teaching woodwork, Evenings filled with laughter from neighbors who know me not as a victim but as a man who stood his ground. Every day I walk through my front door and remind myself, this house stands because dignity stood first. And so, I leave you with this. Comment below the lesson that speaks loudest to you. Is it the boundary parents must keep, the warning children must heed, or the truth about character we all must remember? Share your lesson, I'll read every word, because your wisdom may be the very thing someone else needs to hear to find their own strength. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.